is very much in line with everything we've talked about, but he was also saying that it's an indicator of dehydration. And I think that's the part that's hard for people to understand. Do you think you could kind of explain that a little bit better?
Sure. Well, the most important facet about hydration itself is not the water, because we have water everywhere, but that doesn't mean we're going to be hydrated from it if we just drink it. So as we talked about earlier, how the kidneys, the RAS system clears out all the minerals if we are out of osmolality. So if you don't have enough water and we just have a lot of sodium and a lot of potassium, we can't even really excrete enough. And then we're going to really become dehydrated and also sick. But if we're out of one or the other, like this person that you talked about, oversalted the food, then there's going to be a lot more sodium. So in the process of elimination, a lot of water also eliminates. And so if you're not starting out with drinking a lot of water with the sodium that you're taking, then it's sort of a double whammy. Because if you drink a lot of water as well as a lot of salt, yes, you will urinate excess sodium and water, but it's not going to make you dehydrated per se, because your potassium stays. You're just really getting rid of your excess sodium, but you have plenty of water to excrete, because with urination, you don't just urinate salt. It has to come out with water. But if you're not drinking enough water, but drinking in a lot of salt, you're still excreting the same amount of sodium and water, but you don't have enough water. So then it is extremely dehydrating. And the same, by the way, with excess potassium. So when people are taking potassium supplement, the same way, if you're eating a lot of meat and you're not salting it, you're taking in a lot of potassium, which the RAS system will want to get rid of. So then also you're dehydrating yourself. So I'm looking at some of the faces of people that I deal with or just watch on YouTube, and I can pretty much tell whether they dehydrated or not, because if they're getting a lot of puffiness under the eye or a lot of puffiness on top of like I have a very big eyelid area, which is usually not popped up at all. I don't know, not because it's early morning, but generally speaking, it is not. But when I'm looking at people who are not properly hydrated, they usually have it a little bit puffed up and it's hanging over their eyes. And these are people who otherwise would have the kind of eyes like I do, but you clearly can tell it's a puffiness. And under the eyes, they will have a lot of puffiness, which indicates to me that the body is trying to retain water and it's putting it into different areas to sort of hold on to it. And so this puffiness is a sign of dehydration. It's a sign of inappropriate osmolality of whatever they drink, if they drink.
That's fascinating, because this is one of the other reasons I wanted to chat with you, is I work with so many people who do keto and carnivore, and so many of them, complain that if they add sodium to their food, they then retain lots of water. So the next day, like, they can't get their rings off, or they have 10 pounds up on the scale and those kinds of things. So it makes them not want to add sodium to anything, because they think that it's a bad thing to have this sort of water retention. But you're saying that that's coming because they're not drinking enough water to keep up with
sodium. So what the way this one would work, that if you're drinking enough water and the body has plenty of water, it has no reason to retain it. So when you retain water and you create edema, there's a reason for it. It's not normal. So if your body is creating its edema, it's telling you something. It's telling you that it's retaining water for some reason. And if you're retaining it, it's either retaining it because you're coming down with a bug. That's actually a very common reason why you're retaining water. Or during, for women and cycles, it could be at the premenstrual phase, or it could be at ovulation phase. In both cases, the body is preparing for something, right? So it's retaining water in order to achieve a goal, and then it's going to get rid of it. In fact, this is how we measure whether a migraine sufferer should need extra potassium or extra sodium at the time of ovulation or menstrual cycle, by having them weigh themselves and see if their weight goes up. That means they actually need more potassium, because the body is retaining more water and more salt. So they need salt and potassium, water and potassium. But if their weight drops, then they need salt and water. And so you need to take water with all of these all the time, because if you don't, again, the body is just going to hold on to it because it needs more. All your cells need a lot of water. The cells inside our body, including the brain, as well as the rest of the body, basically the mini ocean around every cell. We have the interstitial space. This is not something that people talk about. We all know we have blood vessels, and the blood carries nutrients to the cell, but we don't understand that it doesn't actually go directly from the blood vessel to the cell. We have a little space around each cell. So if I have the cell here, then there's a room around the cell, which is quite big, which is the interstitial space. I call that the cell's refrigerator. So it's come grab something as you need it. And that space is the one that actually manipulates the electrolytes of the cell. So it has to have everything enough of. It needs to have enough sodium, potassium, magnesium, calcium, everything that it needs, glucose, whatever, so that it can nourish the cell and it can generate the electricity, the nutrients, the protein, whatever the cell has to do. So if we don't have enough nutrients in this liquid, and we don't have enough liquid to start with, then each cell is going to try to retain more and more and more. So we're actually inflating the cell by having it hold onto it because it knows it doesn't have it available. It's just like if you go shopping, if you know that you're just going to go for a vacation and you're not going to be at home, you're not going to buy so much. But if you come back and you're out of everything, you're going to buy a whole lot of stuff, not just because you're going to use it right now, but maybe tomorrow and the day after. So you're going to store up valuable elements for yourself for your immediate use as you need it. So the cell does the same thing. So if you restrain it from being able to get water or salt or potassium or anything else, it's going to try to retain more of it.
That's fascinating. And I think it's just so counterintuitive that if someone wakes up and they're really retaining all this water, they're feeling puffy, like you were saying, and their fingers are swollen, then they think, well, I must be, if my body is retaining all of this water, it's because I had too much salt.
Right. And that's not true, right? It's about they should also increase the potassium. So the balance is important.
Right.
So if you look at people, for example, OMAD, who eat only once a day, there's only so much you can eat. And so the amount of potassium from the meat or fish or whatever you eat in your OMAD, which is just really one ginormous meal, but your stomach is quite limited in its ability to hold food. And so in that case, you're not eating perhaps enough potassium, and which is no problem as long as then you don't also eat more sodium, but you still have to drink the water so that your body can flush out all the nutrients and all the toxins, because the water is really there to flush out the toxins. So if you don't drink enough water, you're not going to be able to do that. But the sodium and potassium balance, and there's several articles about that, by the way, academic articles that say that the balance is a lot more important than looking at just sodium on its own or just potassium. So if I eat a tremendous amount of salt, if I eat 4 or 5 teaspoons of salt, and there are people who do that, I just have to make sure that I also get plenty of potassium in my diet so that it's balanced and it's not going to dehydrate me. It's not going to need for me to drink more water. But in terms of water, there's a formula that anybody can use of how to calculate out how much water you need.
That was my next question.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, ask my question.
No, it's perfect. It's just so great to have a formula because, I think people are just very confused overall of like how much water they should be drinking. And it probably is individualized as well.
It is very individual, and but there are some rules. We all have the same body, right? So we all have the same functions. I mean, we may be fatter or thinner or younger or older, but basically we all have 2 eyes and 1 nose and so forth. So there might be slight differences, but the basic requirements are pretty much the same. So the formula for women and men are different because women have a lot more fat in their bodies than men do.
Yes.
So there's going to be different water need for the two. Men have a lot more water in their bodies than women do, so they will need more water. So for females, you take your weight in libras. I only know it in pounds. I have never calculated it over to kilograms, but you just have to divide everything with 2.202 or something like that to get that measure. But in pounds, so if you have your weight in pounds, say you weigh 100 pounds, then multiply that by 55%, so 0.55. So if you're 100 pounds, that will come to 55. That's how many ounces of water you need. So you divide that by 8, so that comes to, I don't know, that's what about 7 glasses or so. So that would be 7 8-ounce glasses of water. So that's, I think, 240 milliliters in European terms. So that would be 7 glasses of water that you absolutely have to have a day for females. For men, you should multiply, instead of 55%, it's 70 to 75%. So it's much more. And then your maximum is, for example, you take your weight, if it's 100 pounds, the maximum is 100 ounces. And so you need to be between these two, unless you are pregnant or exercising very heavily or are sick, then those change things.